Syl Cat Chat. I'm Syl.
And I'm Kat. Welcome back.
We're glad you're here joining us today. You may be wondering why we look like this today. So Kat thought it'd be fun for us to do a top 3, but based on the year that we were teenagers. So Kat was a teen in the 80s.
80s girl.
And I was a teen in the 90s. So tell us about your outfit, Kat.
Okay, well, one of the big fads in the 80s was neon clothing. And luckily, I still have some. So neon clothing, you know, your hot pinks, your neon greens and yellows were big, you know. So I'm wearing my neon, I'm wearing my denim with my collar up, as you do in the 80s.
Like the cool kids do.
And the big hoop earrings. Because, you know, Jody Watley made those famous. And, of course, bangle bracelets like Madonna rocked in her videos. So.
Very nice, very nice.
How about you, Siv? Explain your outfit. You do not dress like that today.
No, not normally. So I'm rocking, first of all, the brown lipstick because browns and burgundies were real big in the 90s. I have a scrunchie up top like the girls do. Big hoop earrings were still the thing, but we came back with the chokers, the big deal. We had the flannels because that's what the grungy look was. Got the overalls, and like the bad girls do, we wear a little tummy top so that you can see through the overalls on the side.
You little chola, you.
That's how we rolled in the 90s, 1994, 5, yeah. Anyways, so that's what's going on over here. But I will tell you, flannels are no joke. They are hot. So this is coming off, friends, and we're just gonna rock it with the little baby tee.
I'm gonna keep my jean jacket on because I like the collar. I feel
you know
so
why?
retro.
Because you look hella fly,
cool.
right?
Yeah,
hella fly.
It's worth it. Yeah.
Because that's what folks were back in the day. They were hella fly.
Yeah, we're so silly.
All right, so when we say our top 3s, we're talking about our top 3 films of the decade, our top 3 albums, and our top 3 TV shows. So let's let Kathy fire it up since she's doing 80s. Tell us what your top 80s films were, Kat.
My top 80s films, where that was the hardest category for me, actually, because I like so many films. I'm a movie buff. I watch everything. So my top films of the 80s were, of course, you can't have made your way through the 80s without seeing a film with Eddie Murphy in it, because Eddie Murphy was the big blockbuster star of the 80s.
Yes.
And he was only like 22 years old when he starred in Trading Places, which is one of my favorite 80s movies. It's about him and Dan Aykroyd. He's a con artist, street con, and Dan Aykroyd is an investor executive, and these two multi-billionaires, old men, they make a bet for a lousy buck, and they devastate and rock these two men's worlds because they make them trade places. So the con man turns into a rich guy and is loaded, and he's used to not having money, so you know it's crazy mayhem when he gets some. And then Dan Aykroyd doesn't know what to do with himself. He can't get anybody to believe him. They think he's a thief, and all his friends shun him. So needless to say, it's a hilarious movie. You must see it. Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. It makes my number 1 because it makes me laugh every time I watch it.
All right.
So
number 2?
My next one is the complete opposite of a comedy, but it's awesome because it introduced the world to so many young stars at the time that became huge blockbuster names. Can you guess what it is, Sylvia?
The Outsiders.
The Outsiders. It was rockin' with Ralph Macchio. It had C. Thomas Howell, yum yum.
Rob Lowe.
Rob Lowe is my favorite. He's 57, I think, and still fine today.
Still crushing on Rob Lowe.
It had Patrick Swayze. It had Emilia Estevez. It had Leif Garrett, who was popular with the ladies for music back then. And, of course, he had a small part, but he was a huge star just 5 years later when he starred with Dustin Hoffman in The Rain Man. Who am I talking about?
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise. And there's no bigger superstar actor than Tom Cruise. So I gotta say, The Outsiders, it's a film about two, like, kind of gangish. There's the Socs or Socials, the Socs for short, and the Greasers, which were from the wrong side of the track, or at least the opposite side of town. And they get into like a brawl, and one time there's a brawl and there's an accidental definite, and so it takes you through the aftermath of that event that really changed these young men's lives. And some people made it through, and much like street gangs today, many didn't make it through. So it's not a comedy, but it's a film that's written well, stars terrific actors, and you'll enjoy it. The Outsiders makes my second movie. And then my third movie, you know that it was so good that they had to come out with a Netflix series to continue the saga. So in the 80s, I watched, can you guess it, Sylvia?
I don't know this one, no.
Oh my God, you just watched the sequel.
Oh, well, yeah, Coming to America.
No!
Oh.
But you did watch that too. No, this is called The Karate Kid.
Oh, yeah.
And we're all watching Cobra Kai right now. And if you're not, why not? Why are you missing out? The Karate Kid with Ralph Macchio again. Wow, he must have been big in the 80s. I think he was on the cover.
Teen Bop.
Yeah, he was on the cover of like Bop and Tiger Beat. My sister Teresa had those magazines, and I know if you're from the 80s, you know what I'm talking about. But you gotta see Karate Kid. It stars Ralph Macchio, the late Pat Morita, and Elizabeth Shue, who later on went to do like Adventures in Babysitting. So, and now if you watch Karate Kid, which is the first one, which made my list of my top 3, you can watch Karate Kid 2, Karate Kid 3, and then you can go and watch Netflix and watch Cobra Kai. So those were my top 3 films. And like I said, I had honorable mentions for you adults that also can appreciate a good film and great acting. Made my honorable mentions: Scarface. You weren't a teenage boy in the 80s if you didn't rock a poster of Al Pacino or John Travolta and want to be just like them. So Scarface made my honorable mention. It's a film about a drug lord, a guy who comes to the U.S. and becomes a big drug kingpin, and it's exciting. Lots of manipulation, murder, drugs. Not for kids. And then another one that made my honorable mention was the one I mentioned, starring Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman won an Oscar for his performance as a leading man in Rain Man. You got to see Rain Man. It's about 2 brothers, the Babbitts, and one is estranged from his father, and when his father dies, he thinks he's coming into some money, but he learns he has a brother who was left all his dad's fortunes and gotten gains, and you learn about how they create a relationship between each other. So those made my honorable mentions.
All right, so I'm just gonna go with my top 3. I had, like Kathy, I'm a movie person, so I could name 20 90s movies I liked, and I do have honorable mentions, but I'm just gonna stick in the interest of time with my top 3 here. So my top 1, ooh, this is tough, but this is my top 1. The Titanic with Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. I don't have to tell you what this is about, because well, first of all, it's called Titanic. But if you haven't seen it, then you must be living under a rock, because this rocked 1997. Everybody saw this in the theater multiple times. Titanic.
Won many Oscars.
Many. So my second very unique movie for the time, really enjoyable film. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. Forrest Gump. Yeah, this came out in 1995 with Tom Cruise and Robin Wright Penn, and it was unique for its time because it did these flashback scenes where it put Forrest, Tom Cruise's character, into the most memorable time periods, like with the presidents and stuff. And they're like, how did you do that? It was a cool effect for the time. So 1995, Forrest Gump.
Life is like a box of chocolates.
Yes, it is. And he was running. So
run, Forrest, run!
So many lines from that movie. This is the quintessential 90s film. Everybody identifies this. This is like a time capsule of the 90s. Clueless.
Oh, Clueless.
With Alicia Silverstone. It's absolute nonsense. Cher is just your spoiled rich girl, just completely self-absorbed until she takes on a project. This gal who's on the outside, she brings her in, makes her cool. And anyways, it's really a cute film. Clueless. It's absolutely silliness. It's like PG-13. You can watch with your daughters. It's silly. My daughters like to watch this movie. So anyways, those are my top 3. Again, I have many more, but I'm just gonna keep moving.
I actually shared some honorable mentions, and I still had more, but I cut it.
Yeah. We have to, because we have just too many.
We love watching movies, so we're
Absolutely.
big movie buffs. So that was a hard category. We'll take on something easier. What are we going to talk about next, Siv?
So let's talk about our top albums. The music. First of all, I knew Kathy was going to have a hard time with this because I'm glad I didn't have 80s, because the 80s music rocked.
It did.
There were so many good albums in the 80s, but tell them, Kat, did I know your top 2 of yours?
She knew 2 of my 3 right off the bat. But she did have a hint, because I rocked these gentlemen's posters on my closet doors growing up. And I had pins galore all over this denim jacket back in the day. Which is funny, I meant to go to my storage and get my Michael Jackson pens, because what album was topped in the 80s?
Tell us your top 3, Kat.
Thriller! Thriller by Michael Jackson. There was not a single song on Thriller that people are not familiar with. Thriller had Wanna Be Starting Something, Baby Be Mine, The Girl Is Mine, of course Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Human Nature, PYT, and Lady in My Life. So Thriller was the bomb, and that helped me win a contest back in like the 2000s. I went to see that Michael Jackson film they had, and in line they were asking trivia questions. Who could name all the songs on the Thriller album? And everybody could name quite a few, like 6, 7, 8. No one could name them all because there's 9 songs, and I won.
Nice.
I'm a big Michael Jackson fan. So the second album that made my list, Sylvia also guessed, because this man is bomb and will go down in history with Michael Jackson as one of the great artists and creative minds of our time. And this person is who, Sylvia? Who is this person?
Prince
And the Revolution. They rocked everybody out to the soundtrack of Purple Rain, and
yes, they did.
That dropped in 1984. And Prince and Michael both passed away, but their music lives on, and it will for decades. They're going to be like the Elvis Presleys of our time. You're going to be still hearing and listening to their music. And my last album, this was the one Sylvia didn't guess, but I loved it because it was an album of my dad's. And whenever I was sad, I would be in the living room. My brother would laugh at me, my brother Joe, because I would be singing all the sad songs and crying up a storm to Anita Baker's Rapture. So everybody knows Sweet Love, You Bring Me Joy, Been So Long, Mystery, Same Old Love. So Anita Baker, a true lady and artist of rhythm and blues. And my dad introduced me to her. My dad introduced me to Whitney Houston as well, and Sade. So my dad had a good musical ear. So
he did.
Siv, who did you pick as your top 3 albums? This, I would have no idea what my sister thinks are her favorites. So I'm listening on pins and needles.
I have to add something to Kathy's album, her Anita Baker, because you got to remember, Kathy and I, there's a 7-year difference. So she was a teenager and I was kind of still a little girl. And she would be listening to these sad songs and crying. And me and Joey, that's our brother, who's a couple years older, we're like, why doesn't she just stop listening to them? Like, I mean, it just makes her cry.
I was a teenager in high school. Teen angst. I was devastated. My boyfriend and me weren't talking. It was horrible.
But 8-year-old Sylvia's like, if the music makes her sad, turn it off. You know, it just made no sense. But God bless, she was a teenager. That's how we are when we're teens. So anyhow, for me, for my music of the 90s was fun, but it was also some of it was a little angsty, you know. I mean, so there was a variety, and it was very hard for me to pick top 3. But I chose Crazy Sexy Cool by TLC, 1994, because I just had to think of albums where I really liked almost every song. And like, I remember playing the full album all the way through, not skipping any. So Crazy Sexy Cool, I could probably sing along with today. And then my second favorite was Daydream by Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey was a big deal in the mid-90s. That was 1995, and we're talking about like Fantasy, Always Be My Baby. Like, these are the kind of songs of the 90s. And got a little country in the 90s. Country kind of became mainstream in the 90s with Shania Twain in 1997.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, she had two hot albums in the 90s, but one was called Come On Over, and that's like, man, I feel like a woman, and like, whose bed have your boots been under? I mean, and it's so funny because here I am also listening to Tupac and Snoop Dogg, but throwing in some Shania Twain. And then my honorable mentions, I am going to mention real quick because it's so weird, but Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, like, she just rocked everybody's world because it was different, it was unique. And so again, here I am, Boys to Men, TLC, Alanis Morissette, Shania Twain. My music tastes were all over the place. And of course, my another honorable mention is Tony.
Oh,
Feels
yes.
good. 1993, it felt good. They were called the Sons of Soul. The album's called Sons of Soul, and it is just fun, danceable music. Tony.
And they were out of the Bay Area, so of course
Oakland.
We're from Oakland, so that's why Tony has to make the honorable mention list.
Absolutely, they had a song called the Oakland Stroke, and everybody from Oakland knew that song.
And I'm like my sister. My music is still to this day all over the place. I will be listening to George Strait, but I'll be rocking out to Dr. Dre. And it's funny because I don't sort my music, so when I'm in the car with someone and I'm like playing my Spotify playlist, it's wacky because I feel like I can sing everything, so they belong together on the same playlist, but they're looking at me like, wow, you went all the way from, Elvis Presley to, Nirvana. You're just like, are you, crazy? But
absolutely.
Yeah, I totally listened to Shania Twain and Mariah Carey. And Mariah Carey was going to make my list, but she was in the 90s, so it had to go on Sylvia's list.
Hey, you didn't get through the 90s without listening to Tupac. I'm just going to say, okay, you didn't, everybody in California was blasting, tell them, Cavi.
California love.
Yeah, you did. Anyhow, too much music. Sorry, I didn't mean to share so many, but it was hard. Music was hard.
We love music and movies. What can we say?
We do. But tell me about your top 3 80s TV shows.
Okay.
What were you watching every Friday night?
Oh,
and
it's funny you say Friday night because every Friday night I was tuning in to Dallas. I wanted to hear about the wealthiest oil family in Texas. I was watching the Ewings of South Fork.
Who shot JR?
And Who Shot JR was a big thing back in the day. CBS had this promotion, Who Shot JR? And everybody could be a suspect because JR was a pretty bad dude and had a lot of enemies. But who did shoot JR? Do you know? Because I know. Do you know?
Man, I forgot. Was it not Sue Ellen?
No, it wasn't. It was Sue Ellen's sister.
Oh.
Kristin
it
shot
been
JR.
Sue Ellen.
She had every reason, man. She had every reason. But that was the obvious choice. But it was Kristin, Sue Ellen's sister, JR's sister-in-law, who also happened to be his mistress. So she was a little angry, so she shot JR.
Hey, sisters will do that though, right? I mean, I'll just about shoot somebody for you. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, we have each other's back. You don't hurt my sister.
I wouldn't be sleeping with your husband though, so I don't want a sister like Kristin. I'll take you any day, Sylvia.
I meant the more have your back aspect, so I took that wrong. I just meant I'll beat someone up for you, Kathy. I got you.
Oh, I know she will too. Okay, and my next show that I was watching then, and now I watch it on Hulu or Netflix or wherever I can see it, and I've watched it from beginning to end again. Now remember, Dallas had 14 seasons, so if you lived through the 80s and early 90s, you watched Dallas. Now another one of my top ones also ran 11 seasons, and this was a sitcom. If I gave you a hint, you'd probably know what it was, but it's about a place with people, everybody knows your name.
Cheers!
It was Cheers with Ted Danson, and originally it had Shelley Long, and it was about the comings and goings and the relationships and friendships at a bar that could be in any town, but this one happened to be in Boston, and it was full of laughs. It starred Shelley Long and Ted Danson for a while, and then when she left, I forgot the
Kirstie Alley.
Kirstie Alley, yeah. She starred as Rebecca Howe on the series, and she actually was pretty awesome opposite Ted Danson as well. So that made my list.
That was a good one. Cheers was a good one.
It was.
Norm! Everybody knew Norm.
Everybody knew Norm and Cliff. Yeah. And it had probably one of the most famous spin-offs of all time, which I watched this show from beginning to end as well. It was about
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
So it had Frasier Crane, who also had a relationship with Diane, our Shelley Long character, and he went off to have his own show, which was very successful, starring Frasier and his brother, Niles. So those are worth seeing. And then my last one, I'm not sure Sylvia would be familiar with this, but my mom would be familiar with it. I watched it with her, and I gotta admit, one of the only reasons why I watched it, well, there were two reasons I watched it. I love gangster type movies, you know, Al Capone type thing, and I also liked the actor at the time very much so, and of course I liked the bad boy. So I watched Crime Story. Did you ever watch Crime Story?
No.
Crime Story took place in 1960 Chicago, and it was about Lieutenant Torello and his crime squad against organized crime, trying to take down the bad guy. And the bad guy at that time that was doing dirt was Ray Luca, played by Anthony Dennison, who you'll also would have known starred recently in The Closer and then its spinoff also Major Crimes. And Tony DeLuca, or Ray DeLuca, he was hot to me, and he was the bad guy, and Torello was trying to take him down. And that one, you would have, you know, if you lived through the 80s, you might have caught it, you might not have caught it, but it is out on DVD, and I recommend you watch it if you have not. So Crime Story ran for only 2 seasons. So if you snoozed, you missed it. So check it out, because a lot of things go the way of a couple of seasons. You know, maybe they didn't get hyped up enough. Maybe nobody knew when and where to find them. But it's worth watching TV. So those were my 3.
Awesome. So TV was hard only because like a movie comes out in a certain time, and so does an album. But TV shows run. They could have started in 87 but gone to like 97. So there were shows I watched in the 90s that carried over from the 80s, but I wanted to choose exclusively 90s shows. So I chose my top 3, and I watched every episode of this show. It was Beverly Hills 90210.
Oh, yeah.
It started in 1990. It was your typical teen rich kids in Beverly Hills, and it had, you know, all these young actors. Luke Perry was so dreamy, like you just watched it.
Rest in peace, Dylan was smoking hot.
Dylan was he was such like the bad boy. He was like the James Dean of the 90s, like Jason Priestley, Jenny Garth, you know, all these folks. Brian Austin Green was this little nerdy kid who ended up becoming cool, but anyways, it was like, you know, all the shenanigans of these rich kids. And when you're not rich, it's kind of just cool, like a window into these rich people's lives. But it was silly, and I'm rewatching it now on like I don't know, Hulu or something, and it's absolute nonsense. Like it's so...
I watched it too. I watched it all the way through again now, like recently in the last couple of years. Yeah.
It's very silly, and the fashion is so 90s though. Like just the high-waisted jeans, chunky belts, just oversized clothes. So a lot of the 90s trends are coming back. So you could probably buy what I'm actually wearing in a store today.
Especially
so
the overalls.
That's really interesting to see, because first of all, I never thought scrunchies would become cool again, and they are everywhere. Yeah. So anyhow, that was my top one, Beverly Hills 90210. This we all watched, we all loved. It starred a awesome family of talented comedians in living color.
Yes.
Okay, so this was a sketch comedy show with the Wayans family, Keenan Ivory Wayans, Damon Wayans, Marlon Wayans, Sean Wayans. I mean, this family just is so talented, and they're hilarious. This is where Jim Carrey got his start before he was a big movie star, in living color, and we watched that show every single weekend.
David Allen Greer got a start. Tommy Davidson, J-Lo, and Rosie Perez were...
They had Fly Girls. dancers before the start of the show. So anyways, in living color, it's great. It's hilarious. And it was real challenging for the times. Like, I mean, they were just pushing people's buttons, and yeah, it was good stuff.
They should bring something back like that today. But in today's culture, it would be so difficult. It would
honestly,
be,
that's what
it
they
would
said.
be so watered down, and you wouldn't get that like Dave Chappelle shock factor that you get.
Yeah. I watched an interview, and they said exactly that we can't reboot it, because in today's society we couldn't laugh at the things that we used to, you know. But anyhow, my other one, and that was in 1990 as well. My third 1990 show, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh yeah.
Will Smith, he's a big actor now, and but he started out as a rapper, DJ with DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and he had this show. It was about this kid from Philly getting into trouble, going and living with his family in Bel-Air, and him kind of just a fish out of water, learning what this rich family that he doesn't get. But it was hilarious. It had serious episodes. Him and the family really ended up bonding and becoming close. Carlton is his super square cousin, who's just like, he does the Carlton, and oh, it's just a hilarious show. It's held up well. And my honorable mention is Friends. And because Friends started in '94, but we're into 2004, so I didn't count it, but that was my TV. TV was fun in the '90s.
Yeah, TV was fun in the '90s. It really was. I remember watching like Living Single. I watched Living Single, and I did watch 90210, Dawson's Creek,
Melrose Place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of fun stuff. So something I'm not wearing that was a fad in the '90s was like a floppy hat with a flower on it.
Oh yeah, I had those.
So we both did. I remember. I mean, there's so many things. So just some random trends of the '90s that I was able to just kind of pull up. Obviously, baggy jeans, flannel shirts, Mary Janes with knee socks, pagers.
It's funny.
Now we didn't have cell phones.
It's
we have
funny
pagers.
because I didn't have the '90s, and it was hard for me not to pick things out of the '90s. Because even though I was in high school in the '80s, you know, when you're in your 20s and you're in your prime in the '90s, I worked at Contempo Casuals where I knew all the trends, you know. So we were rocking the bustiers with the blazer and a big brooch, you know. So the '90s was fun. I also worked in retail, not just at Contempo, but I was a manager in many retail stores for men. So they were rocking the 40 Acres and a Mule, the Cross Colors, the Carl Kanai, the Z Cavaricis. So the '90s were awesome, and so were the '80s. So that's why we decided to share this program with you. What would you say was your most popular toys in the '90s, Sylvia?
Beanie Babies. That was ridiculous. It was this totally useless fad. They're little stuffed toys that people just collected mass amounts of for no reason at all.
At least they were cheaper to begin with than the Cabbage Patch dolls were in the '80s. People went mad for these Cabbage Patch dolls, which, trust me, my mom had some. They were not cute.
No, I had some.
Yeah, they came with a little birth certificate, and people were like piling into stores, you know, getting in fights with people over Cabbage Patch dolls. So and I know that because I have a younger brother who was so into this, and he made me watch these cartoons. The Transformers were huge in the '90s. My brother collected them. He still has some today. So that's what I noticed were some of the toy trends back then. And I own one, so I was gonna show it to you, but it's from the '90s, and I don't know why I own it and Sylvia doesn't, because she's younger than me. But I had a Tickle Me Elmo.
Oh no, I have one.
Yeah.
I have one. The thing is, I bought that for my son because he was born in '97. So you guys, the '90s was a big time for me. I mean, I was a teenager in the '90s, but I got married in 1997 to my husband and had our son right after. So he picked up the tail end of the '90s. So he doesn't he doesn't know the trends. He was a baby, but I'm just saying, the '90s, the '80s, they were both really great times. It was hard for me not to dip into the '80s because they were good, and I was a kid. So the thing is, I grew up seeing my sister, and I thought she was the coolest person. She was basically like Selena, like with the bustiers and the cool clothes and the just hats. And
I worked at Contempo, 40% off. You rock all the cool trends.
She was so cool, and I just wanted to be like her. She had like every color beads. Like beads were huge in the early mid '80s, and she had every color a strand of beads. And I used to go into her room and try them on, and like I just wanted to be like my sister. And so then in the '90s, when I was a teen and she worked in all these cool stores, she'd help me out with my fits, you know? Like, she got me my first Guess jeans. I felt so cool because Guess jeans, I couldn't get those. You know, my mom would take me whatever's on sale at Mervyn's. But my big sister, Kathy, who got me hooked up with some Guess jeans, I wore the heck out of those jeans. So, anyways, we are well out of time because we have just gone into this. But you can tell this is just a time that we had a great fun. And thank you for thinking of this,
Thanks
Kathy.
for joining us. Come back and visit us again. Bye.
See you later.